The shuttle coughed once and fell silent, as if it too had run out of words for the mountains. Late sun combed the dark pines with gold, and the iron gates of Lupus University stood like an old vow kept for centuries. Emily stepped down with her backpack hugged to her chest, the strap warm from her palm. Gravel clicked under her sneakers, a small, faithful sound. The air smelled of resin and something else she couldn't place. Sharp, metallic, the way a thunderstorm tastes on your tongue. She told herself it was nothing. She told herself to breathe. This was a beginning. Beginnings were fragile but also healing. They asked you to set down what hurt and carry only what you must. She lingered under the arch until the shuttle sighed away, leaving her with her suitcase, the campus map, and the unsteady flutter of being new. Students streamed past in bright laughs and low murmurs. Their strides were sleek, unhurried, like people who had learned the secret of being watched and not minding it. Emily tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and started toward the dorms. The main hall lifted its Gothic spires against the sky like a cathedral carved from night. Stained glass caught light and held it the way a hand holds water, briefly, tenderly. At Wolfbane Hall, the wooden door complained as if woken from a nap. Inside, the air was cool with old varnish and chalk dust, and the staircase creaked as if it remembered every foot. Room 312 swallowed her key with a heavy click, and when the door swung inward, colour spilled at her feet. Scarves slung over a chair, a bedspread stitched with tiny wandering constellations, and a girl kneeling by an open suitcase, arranging a row of tiny bottles on the sill like a parade. "Now there you are," the girl said without looking up, voice bright and bell-like. "I was just about to start labelling your drawers with runic blessings. Hi, I'm Lily." Emily smiled despite the ache of newness. "Emily, hi." Lily sprang up, curls haloing her like wildfire tamed by a ribbon. "Welcome to the chaos. I do first-day pep talks. Here's yours. You're going to be fine. You'll get lost once, possibly twice. Someone will make you feel weird with a stare they think is subtle. And tonight you will choose between studying and letting me talk you into hot chocolate. Choose hot chocolate." Emily laughed, the sound surprising her, loosening the knot behind her ribs. "I could be convinced." "Excellent." Lily's grin softened into something gentler, almost a promise. "And if it gets loud out there—" She tilted her head toward the corridor, toward the campus, toward everything. "We'll make it quiet in here." That, more than the words, soothed. The room was small, second-hand cozy, a place where objects learned your temperature. Emily touched the windowsill. The glass was cool and steady. She unpacked painstakingly as if each neatly folded thing could calm her pulse. Worn paperbacks, a notebook fat with lists, a mug with a chip like a dimple. She set the mug by the lamp. Home is a soft repetition, she thought. The same cup, the same hand. Home can be invented. Bell chimes shivered down the hall. Orientation. They walked side by side, Lily's bracelets singing silver. The orientation hall was vast and stained by stories, its windows etched with moons and wolves and a strange, beautiful geometry of branches. Students filled the pews. Emily and Lily slid into a back row, and the hush tightened like a drawn bow. A woman with silver hair bound into a crown stepped to the podium. Her presence was needle-sharp, her words precise. Discipline, tradition, excellence. The vowels came down like the heads of pins. Emily drifted a little, her gaze wandering through the glass. The light there moved like breath. The colours were soft, and something in her chest answered. Calm, the colours said. Arrive and keep arriving. Healing was a slow verb, and she could learn it. Then she felt it. That odd sensation of being seen as if through smoke. She turned her head as if woken from a dream. 3 rows ahead, a boy leaned back easily in his seat, dark hair falling into his eyes. Something about him stopped noises in her. He didn't have the polished cruelty of the crowd, that razor grace. What he had was a stillness that made everything else look like acting. He turned, under no obligation to do so, and their eyes met. It wasn't electric, not exactly. Electricity flickers and stings. This was warmer, a thrum like the earth under a train, distant but undeniable, amber. His eyes were the colour of resin caught around a leaf, old sunlight gentled in time. His gaze stayed on her long enough that it should have been rude. It didn't feel rude. It felt like a question he was asking himself. "Careful," Lily murmured, without looking. "James Blackwood. He has a reputation for not being boring." Emily faced front again, her mouth gone dry. "Is not being boring a crime?" "In some jurisdictions," Lily said. "In this one, it's complicated." Complicated. Emily let the word sit in her mouth like a seed. She had come to unfurl. Complications were allowed, maybe even necessary. The thought soothed. She breathed like she was learning how. After the speeches, the hall emptied in a flow of voices. Names and majors drifted by like scented smoke. "He's looking at you again," Lily said lightly, and Emily, traitor to calm, looked. James had not made any theatrical effort to approach. The crowd parted around him, and he moved through it like a note moves through a song. He glanced back once over his shoulder. His mouth shaped something like a smile, but not for anyone else to see. Then he was gone. "See?" Lily said, hooking her arm through Emily's. "Not boring. Come on. Food solves most problems we can't name." The dining hall glowed with chandeliers, the ceiling an old sky. Emily filled a plate mechanically, grateful for tasks with edges. Spoon, tray, sit. They slid into a table by the window. Outside, the lawn lifted toward trees, and the mountains smudged the horizon with blue. "So," Lily said, tearing bread, "what did you leave behind?" Emily let the question open. "A town you can drive out of in 7 minutes. A shop that smelled like cardboard and cinnamon. People who used my name like a borrowed thing." She swallowed. "I left the habit of apologizing even when I was breathing." Lily's eyes warmed. "Keep that one left. Here, we apologize for other things. Loud necklaces. Unruly joy." "Loud necklaces?" Lily waggled her wrist. "Guilty. We'll start you on subtle joy and work up." A flock of laughter flared to their left. Emily glanced over before she could stop herself. James had joined a table, and the air around it changed, the way air changes near a bonfire. A girl sat close to him, sharp-cheeked and beautiful in a way that made you think of icicles and high windows. She said something that made the table grin, but her eyes, when they cut toward Emily, were unreadable as a frozen pond. Emily looked down quickly, cheeks hot for no reason that made sense. "Don't let Ava scare you," Lily said, deadpan. "Ava?" Blackwood, Lily said, flicking her gaze. Sister, silver spoon, steel spine. They look alike, Emily said, before she could interrogate why she was looking at all. In the eyes. Family is funny like that, Lily said softly. It keeps the same kind of light. Later, the day folded itself into narrower rooms and quieter voices. Lily showed her the library, vaulted, kind, smelling of foxed paper and ink. She pointed out the best seat along the window, where afternoon soothed even the strictest pages. She made a map of the campus with her hands, the greenhouse where winter didn't win, the quad where someone always had a guitar and terrible courage, the door that never opened for anyone, rumour said, except on the last snow of the year. Not that we have to try it, Lily added. But you will. I can see it. You've got the look of a girl who keeps keys she finds on sidewalks. I do, Emily confessed, laughing. I don't know why. Because one day one of them will fit, Lily said, and that will make all the days it didn't feel like practice, not failure. It was the gentlest definition of patience Emily had ever been offered, and it soothed like a good hand on a tense shoulder. She tucked it away, the way she tucked away recipes and phone numbers and the exact color of the mountains at 5 o'clock. Dusk prowled the edges of the sky when Emily slipped out alone for air. The path to the quad was a long inhale. Leaves made a quiet weather of their own. Lamps clicked on in a string like softened pearls, and somewhere a bell tolled, less time than tenderness. She walked until the day thinned and the campus lifted into its evening self. Slower, quieter, the footfalls of people with rooms to return to. A breeze lifted her hair and set it down again. She closed her eyes. The word that came was simple and astonishing because it felt allowed, safe. When she opened them, he was there. Not a dramatic arrival, no swirling cape, no movie music. Just a boy standing with his hands in his pockets by the old oak, head tilted as if he were listening to the tree tell a long story. Up close, he looked like he slept too little and thought too much, which was familiar in a kind way. The last light gathered in the hollows of his throat, and she found herself fascinated by the quiet of him, the way he didn't need to occupy space. Space simply organized itself around him. He noticed her and straightened a little, not alarmed, not beckoning, a courtesy of attention. "You found the best tree on the first day," he said. His voice had the kind of roughness that happens when people laugh more with their breath than with sound. "Good omen." "I could use one," Emily said, surprised that her own voice didn't betray how aware she was of hers. He nodded at the oak's thick, knotted trunk. "It's older than most of us put together. It's patient." "I'm trying to be," she said. He smiled a fraction. "Most people try to be brilliant." "I thought those were mutually exclusive." The corner of his mouth edged up more. "You'd be surprised." Silence slid in. Not awkward, not needy, just a space for the air to cool. The lamps hummed. Somewhere behind them, someone shouted a name in delight, and the name returned a minute later, softer, from the dark. "I'm James," he said finally. "Emily." "Welcome, Emily." He said it like a benediction, or maybe like he was testing the feel of the syllables on his tongue. Then, as if some inner clock had chimed, he flicked his gaze toward the dorms and back. "Don't stay out late the first week. The campus gets strange at night." Her laugh came thin, unsure. "Strange how?" He considered. The way places do when they remember more than they forget. That's poetic, she said, and meant it. It pleased her, the image of a campus with a memory. Maybe she could rest inside it, the way you rest inside a story someone else started. Or pretentious. He tipped his chin toward Wolfbane Hall. Either way, it's a good excuse to get sleep. And you? She asked, surprising herself with the question. Do you sleep? Badly, he said after a pause. But I'm working on it. There it was again, that unguardedness that made her want to step closer and not touch. She settled for a nod. I'm good at sleep, historically, I could advise. Please do, he said solemnly. The campus will thank you. She smiled without effort. Pillow, window cracked. One new thing to be grateful for. Lately, I've been trying to make the gratitude thing less corny and more medicinal. Healing, he said softly, trying the word, and it seemed to fit something in him. I like that. So did she. The moment felt like a thread she hadn't known she'd been carrying, finally pulling free. She wrapped it around her finger mentally, as if she could save it for nights when the wind had teeth. Good night, James, she said. His look lingered, steady as a hand on a railing. Good night, Emily. She walked back slow, because sometimes going slow is what saves you. In the room, Lily was perched cross-legged on her bed, a row of tiny candles lined up like a congregation. Hot chocolate? She asked without looking up, answering a question Emily hadn't asked. I made a poor student's version with whatever the vending machine calls cocoa. Emily laughed. Yes, please. Steam curled like a cat. The first sip was shamelessly sweet, and her shoulders dropped a measure. Lily passed her a blanket that smelled faintly of lavender and old libraries. The world shrank to 4 walls and 1 warm cup. They talked in the small way people talk when they're putting each other away carefully for the night. Hometowns, strange teachers, things they'd never say if anyone else were listening. What did you think of orientation? Lily asked, blowing at her drink. Long. Emily made a face. Formal, like it was trying to iron us. That's traditional, Lily said. First, they make you flat. Later, you'll wrinkle in your own shape and they'll call it growth. Do you speak in poetry on purpose? Only when I like someone, Lily said, bright as a match, then softer. You looked less scared when you came back. Emily stared into the cup until the chocolate made a small galaxy. I met a tree, she said. Then, after a beat she couldn't talk herself out of, and a boy. Ah, Lily said. Yes, the university provides both. They teach different subjects. Which is safer? The tree, Lily said, without hesitation. Until you understand the boy. Emily folded the blanket around her and let that be enough. We'll see. You will, Lily said gently, and turned off the lamp, leaving the room a soft blue. The window framed a piece of night. A moth tapped the glass once, as if asking to be remembered. Emily lay on her side and found the outline of her chipped mug by feel, a talisman she'd brought for nights just like this. She breathed long, temple to pillow, and let her mind untangle slowly, like hair under warm water. Safe, grateful, healing. At the edge of sleep, the campus seemed to lift its old head and listen back. Stairs settling, radiators sighing, books remembering whom they had been read by. Beyond the buildings, the forest sighed too, a sound with roots in deeper time, and, only for a second, something in that sound tightened, like the air drawing breath before a word you can't quite hear. She told herself it was wind. You can love a place without knowing its history. You can love a person without knowing the page they'll turn next. In the morning, she promised herself, she'd learn the way to the greenhouse. Lily had promised was a summer that kept its promises. She'd find a sunny corner of the library and let the light rest on her like a hand. She'd choose again to be here, which was an act of faith and therefore brave. The thought soothed her into sleep, soft and whole. And if, somewhere far off, a wolf lifted its gaze toward the moon and made a sound that was old as bone and night, the sound did not enter the room. In room 312 there was breath and warmth, and the small, stubborn practice of being new and kind to yourself. The rest would come. It always did. Morning arrived like a shy guest, slipping through the ivy-framed window of room 312. Emily stirred beneath the blanket Lily had tossed over her the night before, the scent of lavender and faint chocolate still clinging to the fabric. For a moment she lay still, listening. The building spoke in soft groans, pipes humming, distant doors shutting with patience. She had always measured safety by sound. Too quiet meant danger, too loud meant chaos. This balance felt almost healing, as though the dorm itself whispered, "You are allowed to rest here." She rose slowly, letting her bare feet touch the wooden floor. Cold, grounding. A reminder that she was in a new place where she could begin again. Lily was already awake, her red curls spilling like fire over a notebook. She hummed as she sketched, a tune light as rain. A green pendant glowed faintly at her throat, catching Emily's eye. "Morning," Emily said, voice soft. "Morning, dreamer." Lily grinned. "First day of classes? Ready for the madness?" "As ready as I'll ever be." Emily pulled on jeans, a sweater, and the courage she hoped would last longer than coffee. Together they walked across the campus, morning air crisp, carrying pine and the hush of anticipation. Students moved with that same unearthly grace Emily had noticed yesterday. They seemed carved from some older story. She clutched her notebook tighter, reminding herself she belonged by scholarship, if not by lineage. Healing thoughts, she told herself. Every step forward is a thread weaving a safer future. Their first class was literature in Moonstone Hall. The room felt like a cathedral of words, tapestries of old myths on the walls, sunlight spilling through tall windows. Dr. Hawthorne, thin and wiry, began with Gothic literature, his hands sketching invisible arcs in the air. Emily scribbled notes diligently, but her attention kept drifting. A girl across the room stared at her openly, pale skin luminous, eyes unreadable as obsidian. And James sat 2 rows away, amber gaze half-lidded, yet keen enough to pierce through the room's shadows. When their eyes met again, her chest tightened. She looked down quickly, the page of her notebook blurring. She told herself she had come for books, not for boys who looked like secrets with legs. Still, warmth pooled beneath her ribs. Healing or dangerous, she couldn't yet tell. After class, Lily tugged her outside. They sat under the oaks, leaves whispering. "Spill," Lily teased. "What's with you and James?" "Nothing," Emily insisted, though the word trembled. "He just looks. Predators look, poets look, professors look. The difference is what they do after." Lily popped a grape into her mouth. "My advice, don't rush. Let time show you the difference." Emily nodded, holding on to the words like small anchors. She needed anchors, because the day unfolded with more strangeness. In botany, the greenhouse brimmed with plants that pulsed faintly as if alive in more than one sense. Students tossed around words like moonroot and bloodvine, and Emily felt the distance between herself and them widen. Yet Lily's enthusiasm was contagious. She spoke to the professor about herbs with reverence, her hands moving in graceful arcs as if tending invisible vines. Emily, watching, felt something gentle unfurl inside. Admiration, yes, but also belonging. Sometimes friendship itself is healing, she thought. By evening, exhaustion wrapped her bones, but curiosity kept her awake. She returned to the dorm with Lily, and they sat in the dim light, sharing stories. Emily spoke of her small town, the bakery next door, the nights she read by a flickering bulb. Lily shared tales of charms and half-whispered spells passed down like lullabies. Between them stretched two worlds, yet somehow the conversation braided them together. When sleep finally claimed Emily, she carried with her the day's fragments, James's quiet intensity, Lily's bright warmth, the strange hum of plants in glass houses. The campus was not ordinary, that much was clear. But in the silence before dreams, she told herself that even in strangeness there could be gentleness. Even among shadows, healing light could be found. The rain began before dawn, soft as a secret, threading its way down the ivy walls of Wolfbane Hall. Emily woke to its rhythm, a steady percussion against the window, and for the first time in years she felt the kind of quiet that did not ask her to hurry. She lay still, listening, the sound wrapping her like a lullaby, like a healing hand smoothing her thoughts. The world was new and strange, but in that half-light it was also kind. Lily still slept, curls strewn across her pillow like a red tide, breathing even and calm. Emily smiled faintly and slipped from bed, tugging on a sweater, padding barefoot across the wood floor. She opened the window just enough to let the cool air wash in. It smelled of pine, rain-soaked stone, and something sharper beneath, iron, old earth, as though the campus itself remembered storms long past. Classes were cancelled that morning. The message blinked on her phone like a reprieve. Instead of hurrying, she wandered. The halls echoed with fewer footsteps, the kind that belong to people who thrive in rain, who understand its cleansing rhythm. She carried her umbrella but didn't open it. She wanted to feel the drops, to learn the shape of this weather against her skin. Each drop, she thought, was a reminder that the earth still speaks. Sometimes healing comes in nothing more complicated than letting yourself be touched by the sky. The library called to her, its tall arches and shelves humming with quiet. She settled by a window, spreading out her notebook, though she didn't write. She let herself drift in the stories pressed into the spines around her. A boy with raven dark hair drifted past her table, silent as shadow. Not James, but another. His gaze sharp, predatory. He glanced once at her throat before moving on. Emily's pulse leapt, and she reminded herself to breathe slowly, as though exhaling could be an anchor. Hours slipped by until the rain softened into mist. She closed her notebook, ready to return, when she caught sight of him, James, standing at the far end of the hall, leafing through a heavy volume as though it were nothing. He wore the stillness, like armor, like a vow. When he looked up, their eyes caught, and the distance folded. Something in his gaze was quieter today, less guarded, almost human in its ache. "Lost again?" he asked when she approached, his voice low enough to be part of the library's hush. "Not lost," she said, "just wandering. That's the first step to being lost. And the first step to finding something you didn't know you needed." She surprised herself with the boldness, but he didn't flinch. Instead, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly, the ghost of a smile. "You're stubborn." "Or hopeful," she countered. His gaze softened. "Maybe both." The conversation lingered like rain in the air. They walked out together, silence not awkward but steady, like two streams flowing side by side. The mist clung to the campus, softening edges, turning spires into watercolor. They reached the oak she had first seen him beneath. He touched the trunk absently, reverently, as though it too were part of his family. "This place has roots deeper than you think," he said. "I believe that," Emily replied. "You should also believe it can be dangerous." His tone carried warning, but beneath it was something more. Concern, almost protective. She studied him, the amber in his eyes burning against the grey day. Danger doesn't always mean harm. Sometimes it means truth. He looked at her as though she had spoken something he had long thought, but never said aloud. The silence between them thickened, not heavy, but intimate, like a thread pulled tighter. The days that followed unfolded in rhythm, classes that hummed with strange lessons, nights that carried laughter with Lily, and fleeting moments where James seemed to appear in the periphery, always watching, always near. Emily learned the way of the campus, but she also learned herself, how her fear could soften into curiosity, how her loneliness could be met with connection. Healing, she realized, was not a sudden miracle. It was the slow weaving of safety, one thread at a time. One evening, Lily dragged her to the greenhouse. Lanterns glowed softly among vines, painting everything in gentle gold. Students whispered charms to plants that glistened with dew. In that quiet magic, Emily felt both out of place and somehow essential, as though the space had been waiting for her. James arrived late, slipping in with rain still on his shoulders. Their eyes met across the rows of moonroot blossoms, and she felt the now familiar tremor in her chest. He didn't speak at first, just walked toward her, slow, deliberate, as if afraid to break something fragile between them. "You keep showing up where you shouldn't," he said softly. "Or where I should," she answered. He exhaled, a sound that held both surrender and relief. "You're going to change things, Emily." "Maybe that's what I'm meant for." The lantern light caught them both, soft and forgiving. She thought of how healing sometimes isn't about erasing wounds, but about learning to carry them without breaking. In his eyes, she saw someone who carried too much, and in hers, perhaps he saw someone willing to share the weight. The night folded around them, and for the first time since arriving, Emily no longer felt like an intruder in this world. She felt like a piece of it, alive and necessary, her heart steady against the strangeness. And somewhere in that closeness, in the quiet way James stood beside her, she realized, beginnings don't heal you all at once. They heal you moment by moment, until suddenly you are no longer the same. The season tilted almost without warning. One morning, the leaves above Wolfbane Hall were emerald, and by the next they had turned bronze, trembling with the first whisper of autumn. Emily noticed the change as she carried her books across the quad, a chill threading through the air that wasn't entirely explained by weather. The campus breathed differently, as if drawing in before a long exhale. She walked slower, wanting to memorize the in-between. The scent of damp earth, the crisp bite of air, the promise of endings that could still feel like beginnings. Healing, she thought, was like this too, not a single moment, but a gradual turning, a slow unfurling of colour where fear used to live. James had been a shadow and a presence all at once. She would find him in the library, leaning against tall stacks with a book half open, or in the courtyard, standing where the lamplight carved halos around the stone. Their conversations never lasted long, measured exchanges, hints rather than confessions, but the silences they shared carried weight. Sometimes she felt he was teaching her the language of pauses, of looking without rushing to speak, of being known without needing to declare anything. One evening, Lily insisted they attend the harvest gathering, an old campus tradition whispered about in playful tones. The hall was transformed with garlands of dried herbs, candles that flickered in colours beyond flame, and music that lilted like wind weaving through trees. Students wore masks, wolf, raven, moon, some delicate, some frightening. Emily borrowed a silver filigree mask from Lily and tied it carefully, the cool metal pressing against her skin like a second face. When she entered the hall, laughter and music wrapped her. The scent of spiced cider and smoke curled through the air. She let herself be carried by the tide of movement, watching students dance in spirals that looked half ritual, half celebration. For once, she did not feel like an outsider. The mask gave her permission to breathe differently, to belong. It was when she stepped toward the edge of the room that she saw him. James stood near the shadow of a pillar, unmasked, his amber eyes catching candlelight like molten resin. He didn't look at anyone else, not even the girl who brushed his arm in passing. His gaze found Emily, steady, unyielding, as if he had been waiting for her. She crossed to him before she could talk herself out of it. The music swelled. Dancers spun like leaves in wind. He studied her mask, then her eyes behind it. "You wear it well," he said. "It feels safer than I expected," she admitted. "Safety can be an illusion," he murmured, but his tone carried no rebuke, only observation. "And sometimes illusions heal," she countered softly. That made him pause. Then, surprisingly, he offered his hand. She hesitated only a heartbeat before placing hers in his. His palm was warm, grounding, a tether in the shifting room. They stepped into the dance. The movements were simple: turn, sway, circle. But in his arms, the world slowed. The noise around them faded until all she felt was the rhythm of his breath, the steadiness of his presence. He held her lightly, as if afraid she might vanish, yet with enough certainty that she knew he wouldn't let her fall. When the music ended, neither moved to let go. Their eyes held, and in that fragile pause she saw the truth. Beneath his calm exterior lived storms he had never named, wounds carried like shadows. She wanted, desperately, to touch that part of him, not to fix, but to share. Healing, she realized, wasn't about erasing scars. It was about finding someone willing to trace them gently. Later, when the hall emptied and masks were discarded like old secrets, James walked her back to Wolfbane. The night was cold, stars sharp against velvet sky. They spoke little, but each step felt like a vow. At the dorm entrance he stopped, his hand lingering at her sleeve. "Emily," he said, her name shaped carefully. "There are things you don't know. Things that could hurt you." "Then tell me," she whispered. His jaw tightened. "Not yet, but soon." She wanted to protest, to press, but something in his gaze, an ache, a plea, held her still. So she nodded, choosing patience, choosing trust, even in the not knowing. That too, she thought, was a kind of healing. To sit with uncertainty without letting it break you. In her room, Lily was waiting, eyes bright with questions she didn't ask. Instead, she handed Emily a cup of tea that smelled of chamomile and lemon balm. "For rest," she said simply. Emily drank, the warmth spreading through her, softening the edges of doubt. Sleep came with dreams of forests under silver moons, of amber eyes watching through shadows, of hands reaching, but never letting go. She woke with her heart both heavy and light, as if love itself was a paradox, dangerous and safe, fragile and strong, breaking and healing all at once. And when she opened her window to let in the morning air, she swore she heard the campus whisper back, "You are no longer a guest. You are becoming part of the story." The days after the harvest gathering felt altered, as though the campus itself had shifted its weight. Autumn deepened. The trees outside Wolfbane Hall dropped their leaves in waves of gold and russet, carpeting the ground with quiet beauty. Emily carried her books across paths softened by fallen colour, her steps gentler now, her heart learning to trust its own rhythm. She found herself looking for James not out of fear, but out of a new kind of certainty, as though his presence had become a compass, steadying her even when words were scarce. Healing, she realized, was not always a sudden revelation. Often it was the slow, steady acceptance of being seen and being allowed to stay. Their encounters grew longer, more daring. A walk through the library stacks where his hand brushed hers and lingered. A stolen hour beneath the old oak, where he told her fragments of stories that smelled of old blood and older vows. His voice carried the weariness of someone who had lived too long in shadows, yet his eyes softened when they rested on her. Each glance was a question, and each silence between them was an answer. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in bruised lavender, he led her beyond the main campus, down a path lined with lanterns. The forest welcomed them with its hush, branches arching like cathedral beams. They walked in quiet, the kind of quiet that mended frayed thoughts. Finally, in a clearing lit by moonlight, he stopped. "There are things about me," he said, voice roughened by restraint. "Things that don't belong in your world." Emily stepped closer, her breath misting the cold air. "And yet, you keep letting me in." His jaw worked, his hands clenched at his sides. "Because against every warning, I want to. I've carried darkness too long. But when I look at you, I remember there is light." She reached for him, her fingers brushing the back of his hand. "Then let me hold both, the light and the dark. Healing isn't about erasing what hurts. It's about sharing the weight until it doesn't crush us." For a moment he did not move. Then, slowly, he turned his hand and wove his fingers through hers. The world exhaled around them. The forest sighed. The stars leaned closer. And for the first time, James did not look away. Their closeness deepened in the days that followed. Not loud, not rushed, quiet threads binding them. Emily felt her fear of being an outsider begin to fade. In Lily's laughter, in the rhythm of lectures, in the soft glow of late-night candles, she found community. And in James's gaze, she found something rarer still, a home within a person. But the campus still whispered warnings. Shadows lengthened. Stories of creatures stirring beyond the gates reached her ears in fractured pieces. Danger was not gone, only circling, yet Emily felt no urge to retreat. Love itself was not the absence of danger. It was the courage to stand within it, knowing you were not alone. One night, as rain pattered against the dorm window, Emily wrote in her journal, "I came here searching for education. Instead, I found a story larger than myself. I found friendship that feels like family. And I found a boy whose silence speaks louder than 1,000 promises." She closed the book, heart steady. Healing, she thought, was allowing yourself to believe that even in the strangest of places, love could bloom like light through broken glass. When winter came, James walked her across the snow-covered quad, their breath rising in pale clouds. He bent close enough that his words warmed her ear. "You are my safe place, Emily, my healing." She pressed her gloved hand to his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath. "And you are mine." The world around them was vast, mysterious, dangerous. But between them, there was enough tenderness to face it. And so, beneath the ancient spires of Lupus University, their story unfolded. Not finished, not perfect, but alive. And in that aliveness was beauty enough. If this story has brought a spark of warmth to your heart, if you've felt even a little healing in its words, I'd love for you to share your thoughts below. Leave a comment, give a like, and subscribe so we can continue this journey together. Your presence here matters more than you know, and every bit of support helps keep these stories alive.